Tonight, you will eat something cooked. Tomorrow, too. You will eat something cooked every single day for the rest of your life. You have never once survived on raw food alone, and here's the strange part. You couldn't, even if you tried. Somewhere around 2 million years ago, something happened to the human body that made cooked food mandatory instead of optional. One single behavior took a small-brained ape barely surviving on the African savanna and turned it into the only species in the history of life on Earth capable of building a civilization. It wasn't language, it wasn't tools, it was fire and what fire did to a piece of meat. Start with what life looked like before any of this. Your ancestors, before fire, ate the way every other primate eats, raw. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, spend roughly 6 hours a day chewing, just to break raw plants and tough raw meat down enough to swallow and digest. Raw food is dense, fibrous, and stubborn. Your gut has to do almost all the work your teeth and a fire would otherwise do for you. In 2009, primatologist Richard Wrangham published a book called Catching Fire, laying out a theory that had been building for years, that cooking, not meat eating, not tool use, was the single event that made us human. His argument was simple and a little uncomfortable. Cooked food isn't just safer or tastier, it's fundamentally easier to digest, and that single fact changed the trajectory of an entire species. But here's what's fascinating. Cooking does something to food before it even reaches your stomach. Heat breaks down the tough connective tissue in meat and ruptures the cell walls in plants, doing a huge portion of the digestive work your gut would otherwise have to do itself. Scientists describe cooking as a kind of external pre-digestion, a way of outsourcing labor that used to happen entirely inside your body to a fire instead. And that outsourcing came with a price tag attached, paid in calories. In 2009, Wrangham teamed up with researcher Rachel Carmody to test this directly. They fed mice raw meat and cooked meat with identical calorie counts on paper, and the mice eating cooked meat gained significantly more weight. The same food, cooked, delivered more usable energy than the exact same food, raw, somewhere between 30 and 40% more, depending on what was being cooked. Your body was never extracting the calories you assumed it was. Not from raw food anyway. So where did that extra energy go? This is where the story gets genuinely strange. In 1995, anthropologists Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler published a paper proposing something now called the expensive tissue hypothesis. Your brain is an extraordinarily expensive organ to run. It makes up about 2% of your body weight but burns roughly 20% of your resting energy every single day, whether you're thinking hard or doing nothing at all. Most animals cannot afford an organ like that. But Aiello and Wheeler noticed something odd when they compared brain size to gut size across primates. Animals with bigger brains tend to have smaller guts, and animals with bigger guts tend to have smaller brains. Metabolically expensive tissue has to be paid for somewhere, and the gut is one of the most expensive organs in the body to maintain. Their argument was that cooking let our ancestors shrink the gut because cooked food required so much less digestive labor. Every calorie freed up by that shrinking gut got redirected somewhere else, straight to the brain. This lines up disturbingly well with the fossil record. Homo erectus appears almost 2 million years ago with a noticeably smaller rib cage, meaning a smaller gut, and a noticeably larger brain than the Australopithecines that came before. The earliest solid, undisputed archaeological evidence of controlled fire comes from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, dated to roughly 1 million years ago. Layers of ash and burned bones sitting deep inside the cave, where nothing but human hands could have carried fire. Some researchers think fire use stretches back even further than that, closer to when Homo erectus first shows up, though the physical evidence that old is harder to pin down with certainty. Either way, the timing is suggestive. Smaller gut, bigger brain, and somewhere in that same stretch of deep time, fire. But that's only half the story, because cooking didn't just give us something, it took something away too, and what it took is something almost nobody thinks about until they try to live without it. Your gut shrank to fit a cooked diet, which means it's no longer built to extract enough energy from raw food the way a chimpanzee's gut still can. In 1999, researchers led by Corinna Kobnick surveyed more than 500 people following a strict, long-term raw food diet. The results weren't subtle. A significant percentage of the women in that study, somewhere around 30%, had stopped menstruating entirely. Many participants, men and women both, were clinically underweight. Their bodies doing exactly what your body would do couldn't pull enough usable energy out of raw food to maintain normal reproductive function. This wasn't a willpower problem or a diet fad gone wrong. It was biology doing the math, and the math didn't work. Somewhere around 2 million years ago, your species made a one-way trade, cooked food for a bigger brain. There has been no going back since. Here's the part that should sit with you a little uncomfortably. Cooking was the first time in history that food got pre-digested before it ever reached your mouth. It wouldn't be the last. Walk into almost any grocery store today and you're surrounded by a second, much more extreme version of the exact same trick: ultra-processed food, refined down, broken apart, and reassembled into something your body barely has to work for at all. In 2019, researcher Kevin Hall and his team at the National Institutes of Health ran a tightly controlled study comparing an ultra-processed diet to an unprocessed diet, with both groups eating meals matched for calories, sugar, fat, and fiber on paper. The people eating the ultra-processed meals ate about 500 more calories a day than the other group, without noticing, without trying to, and gained weight within just 2 weeks. The mechanism researchers suspect is strikingly familiar. Food that requires almost no digestive effort gets absorbed faster and more completely, the exact same advantage cooked meat had over raw meat 2 million years ago, just turned up to an extreme your ancestors never had to navigate. The brain-building trick that built civilization is the same trick quietly working against you every time you eat something engineered to require zero effort. So the real reason humans started cooking was never really about taste or convenience or even safety from bacteria, even though all of that came along for the ride. It was about energy, about a starving, small-brained ancestor finding a way to squeeze more calories out of the same piece of meat than any other animal on the planet could manage. That single trick rewired an entire species from the inside out, shrinking the gut, growing the brain, and eventually producing the kind of mind capable of building fire into stoves, stoves into factories, and factories into a food system so efficient at pre-digesting your meals that the same mechanism now works in reverse. Cooking once saved your ancestors from starving. Tonight, in a kitchen or a drive-thru somewhere, that exact same mechanism might be doing the opposite. For 2 million years, the fire that built your brain was the rarest, most carefully guarded resource your ancestors owned, something worth dying to protect. Now it's everywhere. It's in your oven, your microwave, the factory that made the food in your pantry. All of it descended from the same trick a hungry ancestor figured out by accident next to a burning log. The fire that built your brain is still burning. It just looks a little different now.